If we could have the family come this way, please. Pallbearers, please lift her casket. You and your brother should sit next to each other and then have spouses on either side. Ladies and gentlemen, if we can have everyone come underneath the canopy. We're just going to wait for just another few moments before we begin to make sure the people that are online, and we said we'd start at 11, and give them the courtesy of that time. Also, under the idea of pikuach nefesh, if you're thirsty, one doesn't typically eat or drink at a grave, but we do have water for you, just to keep you safe and hydrated. Before we actually begin the service, one of the traditions is that at the time of a funeral, the immediate relatives rend their garments, the mitzvah of kriya, and the symbolic notion of what kriya is about is that when a person loses someone very dear, very close, there's a tear in the fabric of the family. In addition, what is recognized is that there's a body and a soul, and when a person passes away, it's the body that dies, the soul continues on, and the body is like the garment of the soul, and that is what is torn, and that's what we acknowledge when a person passes away. And so we're going to ask Danny and Michael to do the kriya. Together. Okay, holding both sides, we make a blessing together. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Dayan Ha'emet. Acknowledge that God is the true judge. Take the tear. One more. Yeah, strong circle. Ladies and gentlemen, at this time we're going to begin the funeral service of Susan Zushi Bleier. Rabbi David Flinkenstein from the Chabad of Wilmette will be officiating. Just as a last reminder, please be sure your phones are off, and we welcome those of you who are joining us via live stream. Begin with the blessing that we make at a cemetery if we haven't been in the cemetery for the last 30 days. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher yotzar eschem badin v'zon v'chilken eschem badin v'hemis eschem badin v'yodei mispar kulchem badin v'hu osid lehachayeschem u'lekayim eschem badin Baruch atah Adonai mechaye hamesim. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who fashioned you with justice, nourished and sustained you with justice, took your lives with justice, knows the sum total of you all in justice, and will restore and resuscitate you in justice. Blessed are you, Lord, who revives the dead. Ato giber leilam Adonai mechayim mesim ato, rav lo heshia mechalkel chayim bechesed mechayim mesim berachamim rabim, soimech neuflim v'roifei cholim matir asurim u'mekayim u'menosa l'sheni ofar. Mi chamoicha ba'agvurus u'medei melach Melech Meimis u'Machayim Atzmiach Yeshua V'ne'emon Ato Lahachiyes Mesim. You are eternally mightily lauded, the reviver of the dead are you, abundantly to save. God sustains the living with kindness, revives the dead with abundant compassion, supports the fallen, heals the sick, releases the confined, and maintains faith in those asleep of the earth. Who is like you, master of mighty deeds, and who is comparable to you, the ruler who causes death and restores life and makes salvation sprout. You are trustworthy to revive the dead. Please join me I'm going to begin with Psalm 23, first in Hebrew, and then please join me in the recitation of the Psalm together in English, as you'll find it in your folder. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai roi lo yechsar, v'noizdesha yarbitzeni, al mei menuchas inahaleni. Nafshi yeshovev yancheni maglet tzedek leman shemo, gam ki elech begeitz hamoves lo irara, ki ato imodi. Shivtecha umishantecha heimo yinachamoni. Ta'arech lefanai shuchel neged tzoreroi, dishanta v'Hashem eroishi koisi revaya, achto v'chesed yefuni kol yemei chaya, v'shavti beveis Adonai le'orech yamim. Together in English. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. As many friends and family are gathered here today to pay tribute to Susan, to Zhuzi Bleier, Shoshana Bat Tibor Margit. We remember the words of the wisest of all men, Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon, who sums up all of the traditions regarding grief and mourning in just 4 simple words. V'hachai yitein el libo. And the living shall take to heart. A funeral is never a time that is scheduled or at a convenient time. It's a time where we prioritize. We put everything else on hold. We stop running. We put our life on pause. It's a time of reflection. It's a sober moment where we reflect upon the value, the sanctity, the significance and frailty of life in general, and more specifically today, to pay tribute and learn from Zhuzi's life. Modern physics has taught us that nothing truly disappears. No substance disappears. It just changes its form. Matter is just another form of energy, and then energy into matter. If this is so regarding the physical, how much more so when we're talking about the essence of life, which is spiritual in nature. Life never dies. Real comfort, therefore, is not when time just passes on and we forget about the life of a loved one, the presence of a loved one. And yes, time heals all wounds. But real nechama, real comfort, is when there's a paradigm shift. And that paradigm shift begins now. It begins with reflecting upon what we're experiencing now. In English, this is called a funeral. In Hebrew, it's a levaya. Similar translation, but essentially, they are diametrically opposed. Contradictory. Funeral comes from the Old French, la fin. It's the end. Finality. It's the last event. In Hebrew, levaya means to accompany, to escort. One represents, if life is about the body, it is the end. In Judaism, we emphasize that the essence of life is the soul, that is life itself. And here we're expressing that we're now accompanying, we're escorting Zhuzhi to a next stage. What does change is our relationship to Zhuzhi. As the precious soul of Shoshana Batibora Margit once lived amongst us, she will now live within us. This is the meaning of, and the living shall take to heart, v'hachai yiten el libo. And so we begin by reflecting upon Zhuzhi's unique qualities, taking them to heart, that they will continue to live within us. We begin by asking for mechila. We ask for forgiveness. If in any way we wrong Zhuzhi in her lifetime, we ask for mechila, we ask for forgiveness now. And certainly speaking about her, there's no way we can do justice to such an amazing woman as Zhuzhi in these few moments. We also ask mechila, knowing Zhuzhi, she would never want to be alive while anyone is speaking about her. And so we ask for mechila that we are speaking about her in her presence. But how can we not? Because we have to take those messages, those life lessons to heart. So we begin with members of the family to please come on up and share your reflections.
We're here today to celebrate the life of Zhuzhi Bleier, a remarkable woman who touched so many people with her energy, her compassion and humility, and also, let's be honest, her brutal honesty and extreme transparency. She was a mother, a grandmother, a nurse, a modern woman, a Holocaust survivor, but above all, she always defined herself by family. Family was important to Zhuzhi because she didn't have one. As a hidden child during the Holocaust, she was forced to grow up without guidance or direction. She didn't even know she was Jewish until the war revealed it, because her parents, who were assimilated and living in the center of Budapest, had converted to Catholicism years before in order to protect her family. The Nazis still tore them apart. So after the war ended, at age 14, Zhuzhi decided to leave Hungary for Israel, not telling anyone, not even her own family or what was left of it. In Israel, at first, Zhuzhi was forced to navigate life alone, but she eventually found strength in 3 other Hungarian orphans just like her. These girls became her new family, lifelong friends, who together all became nurses. It was during nursing school where she met my father, Bundy, a merchant marine, who looked like Tony Curtis, who traveled the world, and most importantly, always brought back American cigarettes. They married and lived in Israel for 12 years until my father saw greater opportunities in the United States. But life in the United States wasn't easy as my father had imagined. While Zhuzhi managed to always find good work as a nurse, my father struggled with various odd jobs due to his lack of formal training. After living 2 years in Indianapolis and giving birth to me, their first child, my parents decided to move to Chicago, a bigger city with better opportunities, but where they knew no one. And my parents worked tirelessly and fought often. Did I say fought often? They did. One another they were both strong-willed. My father very explosive, and my mother determined. In the Bleier household, action took precedence over reflection, and progress was always paramount. 6 years after moving to Chicago, my brother Michael was born. My dad's career started picking up, and my parents purchased their first house. They believed they had achieved the American dream: home, job, kids. However, life changed dramatically when my mother noticed a bump on my brother's arm, and despite doctors' reassurances, Zhuzhi insisted on having a biopsy, and her instincts proved correct. It was malignant. My mother not only saved Michael's life, but also our family. Her strength and my brother's strength during this terrible period brought us together. Zhuzhi's impact extended way beyond our family also. She worked as a head nurse for over 45 years, and in doing so, she touched so many countless lives. So many strangers came up and said Zhuzhi's nursing skills were knowledgeable, diligent, but yet compassionate. After the retirement, I arranged for her to meet her former medical director, and he said to us, "Susan was the most complete nurse I have ever worked with. I trust her more than most doctors." But work didn't define her. Family always did. My mother's greatest joy came from her grandchildren, Ellie, Anna, Benson, Rebecca, Isabella, and Sophia. She treated each of them as special individuals, and she addressed their unique needs. She spent as much time as she could with them, giving each one unconditional love. All of their grandchildren adored Zhuzh, while Mike and I marveled at how much less she criticized them than us. Lucky for all of you. And around the same time she retired, Zhuzhi met Barry Schimmel, who became a loving partner for the last decade of her life. Barry, you gave Zhuzhi companionship in their golden years. You loved her dearly, and you cared for her during those final years, and I truly appreciate it. I'd be remiss if I didn't thank my incredible wife, Caroline. Getting credit from my mother wasn't easy. And while she didn't get it at the beginning, Zhuzhi eventually warmed up to her. As my children say, Caroline, the maximizer, she raised 4 kids, she held down an incredible job, and had to deal with me as her husband. This was beyond my mother's comprehension. Zhuzhi not only respected, but loved Caroline. Zhuzhi Bleier, a child of the Holocaust, raised herself without a family. She had a great influence on our family and left us with a lifetime of memories. Mom, we will never forget your love and kindness, and of course your Hungarian food. Zhuzhi, your legacy lives on in all of us.
Thank you all for coming. I've known Zhuzhi since I've been 15. I have so much to say about her, and I've been really thinking about this moment for a year as she declined. No doubt she was a huge impact on so many parts of my life, and if you're here, she probably was a big impact on you as well. But it was hard to nail down exactly what to tell you to help you know her a little better. But then I realized most of my stories about how Zhuzhi impacted me personally have one common element, a small, very important detail that's been at the center of our shared lives for over 40 years, and that's the kitchen table. It's where it all happens. Every problem, every drama, every conflict with a sibling, a friend, a teacher, a coworker, every tennis match that needs analyzing, every dull Tuesday night filled with banter between kids after soccer practice, it was always a place for our family to tighten up and be away from the demands of everyone else. So this little lady taught me that the center of the universe was a piece of not very artisan wood, supported by 4 laminate legs, and at that table, every family problem was listened to. And at that table, every child's voice was heard. Every issue was dissected over and over and over and over and over, and then strategies and solutions were formed. And of course, everyone ate. I honestly don't know where Zhuzhi learned the value of the kitchen table, of that open-air stage for substance and discussion. Most of you knew her as a very feisty grandma, one that spoke her mind without hesitation. As Danny said, she told you what she thought of what you were doing and always had amazing advice for everyone, even if you didn't ask for it. No time to waste for formality. She told you what she thought, and she was almost always on the money. But there was also the Zhuzhi that lived through fear, who lived during the war without a stable home. Yes, as a young child, she lived in a wealthy home with servants and fine china at the dining table. But by 10 years old, she was moving out on her own from house to house as a hidden child. She was happy to have a bed. She received no comfort from anyone. No one tucked her into bed with a kiss. No one sat her down to ask what she did that day, or how her math test went, or insisted this very scrawny girl eat just one more bite of schnitzel. But somehow this little lady figured it all out. She taught me along the way. I grew up in a simple West Rogers Park apartment, but fortunately during the peacetime of the very luxe 1970s, we had plenty of food on the counter, but our family was divided for other reasons. There were few family dinners. We had a kitchen table, but we typically ate alone at the counter or while watching TV. So together in the early years of our relationship, Gigi and I were both kind of orphans, though in very different ways. And together we learned the importance of that slab of wood with 4 laminate legs. Whether it was in Peterson Park or Wilmette, Gigi's kitchens were always small. Her table was always tiny, and it was always up against the wall with room for only 3 chairs. But it felt enormous, and we could squeeze 8 people around that table squished in her small kitchen. It was absolutely the place where Dan and Mike and me and all of our kids felt the warmth of family. So when I think about what I remember most about this little woman, it's my time sitting across from her at her tiny kitchen table. I learned from her. She learned from me. I respected her. She learned to respect me. And her and I, 2 orphans of the storm, of the world, from 2 very different countries, 2 very different generations, and 2 very different family settings, were alone no longer.
Susan Bleier was not here for your bullshit. Sorry. Let me start again. Gigi Bleier was not here for your bullshit. She was cute. She was tiny. She was a little thing, you know, you can almost put her in your pocket. She was so cute. Until you pissed her off. And then, God help you, she was scary. She was fierce. She scared men. She was not afraid. She wasn't afraid of anything. She was hard like a diamond, sometimes impenetrable. But underneath the surface, just below the surface, there was beauty, there was light, there was softness, there was a heart filled with healing and love. She was a nurse of 50 years. She was a real healer. She was all greens and purples. She was a dervish, whirling around with billowy skirts and amazing scarves, crazy hair, ridiculous glasses, amazing shoes, always amazing shoes. Right? She had fantastic style. And yet somehow she really didn't want to ever be the center of attention. She wasn't the person that walked into the center of the room and the light shone down upon her. She was in the corner, but you would hear her voice, very specific and distinct accent, smiling and laughing. But she didn't like any attention, and she never liked her own face. Fui, fui, she would say. Don't look at me, don't take a picture. When we were kids, she would find pictures of herself and cut her own face out of those pictures, which is a crazy thing to do, right? In later years, when she would be talking to the grandkids on FaceTime, she would always point the camera at the ceiling and nod at her face. Fui, fui, I look horrible, I look terrible. She didn't. She was beautiful. She was absolutely beautiful. She was a contradiction in so many ways, and as both Danny and Caroline said, she didn't have a manual to life. She was thrust into the world, an orphan, went through a few different countries. She didn't have her mother, her brother, her father. She didn't have anybody to model behavior after. And yet, somehow, She would have been 90 years old on July 26th. She didn't want to live to 90, so congratulations, Mom. She did it. When I was 8 years old, on my mother's birthday, I got her, what was that? Nothing. I got her 0 on her birthday when I was 8. No cards, no gifts, no singing, nothing, because why would I? I was 8, right? And she was old. She didn't care about her birthday anyway. Didn't matter, right? I had a happy childhood, for the most part. I had a great brother who always looked out for me, who let me hang out with his friends. Stuart, thank you. We lived in a little house in the middle of a street on Spalding Avenue with a Hollywood Park just down the street where we can go and play all day long. Now, don't get me wrong. Our house was not like all warm hugs and big kisses either. It was a pretty crazy place. But I felt safe there. I felt looked after, and I felt loved. Now, on my birthday, which is August 29th, by the way, so if anybody's keeping score, they want to send me something, I'm here for it. On my birthday, my mother would have a set of traditions. I would wake up in the morning and there'd be candy in the room, little red licorice shoestrings that I would tie in the knots and eat. I would emerge from my room for a special breakfast where she would make me whatever I wanted. Probably in the afternoon, she would take me to my favorite comic store on Western Avenue, where she would patiently wait while I looked for an X-Men or an Avengers comic, or maybe take me to Cut Rate Toys on Devon Avenue and buy me a toy. And then at night, she would feed me my special dinner. She would be marinating skirt steak with balsamic vinegar, olive oil, garlic, salt and pepper. And she would boil crab legs. Sorry, Rabbi. And drawn butter. It was my favorite meal. It was my special meal because I was a special boy. And then afterwards, a beautiful cake, probably a chocolate cake with raspberries, raspberry, strawberry, jam, probably whipped cream, or maybe palatine, right, with strawberry jam. So on my 9th birthday, right, on August 29th, I woke up that morning and there was no candy in my room. A small oversight, I'm sure. I walked out into the house and it was dark. No one was up to greet me. My mom had already left for work. She worked at Bethesda Hospital, usually the morning shift from 7 o'clock till about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And so I went into the kitchen. There was no special breakfast, probably just cold cereal, Lucky Charms probably. I let myself out that day probably to go to the park. Danny and I were latchkey kids, so we would go play in the park all day long. It was the end of the summer, so probably playing with my friends or, I don't know, maybe climbing trees. But I wasn't worried because when I got home that night, for sure, my special meal and my cake would be waiting for me. Well, as it turned out, as I walked through that door, it was like getting punched in the face with chicken paprikash. I didn't like chicken paprikash. And by the way, my father loved chicken paprikash. And so I was devastated. I was gutted. I couldn't believe that my mother had forgotten my birthday, her special, cherished child. And so I remember going into the kitchen with tears streaming down my eyes, just with righteous indignation, telling her, how could she forget about my birthday, right? And that I was probably going to have to run away and go find a family that was going to feed me candy and crab legs, for sure, punish her for that. She sat me down at that kitchen table, and she asked me, how does it feel? How does it feel for somebody not to remember your special day? Gigi Bleier was not here for my bullshit. Danny mentioned that I was sick as a child. Some of you may know that. And it is not an exaggeration to say that without her strength, without her resilience, I wouldn't be here. There's no way. And my children obviously wouldn't be listening to me talk about my mother without her strength. I remember coming home not long after that birthday and complaining that I had some pain in my arm. My mom took one look at my arm and drove me right to our pediatrician. And I remember sitting in his office through the smoke-filled Marlboro haze of his cigarettes, and he was telling my mom to relax. Take it easy, Gigi. I'm sure it's nothing. And I literally remember her grabbing me and putting me in our little Chevy Chevette, driving to her hospital, Bethesda Hospital, to the emergency room where she worked, barging in, grabbing a doctor, and commanding him to perform a biopsy on my arm right then and right there. She was not going to have it. I only found out years later that she had spent months researching, however you researched back then, who even knows, right? Until she found one of only a few doctors in the country that understood what I had and promised her that they would do their best to try to save me. My mom would drive me from the north side of the city, 5843 North Spalding, all the way to UIC Hospital, past downtown. And she wouldn't get on the highway because she didn't drive on the highway. She was scared of the highway. But she drove all the way from the north side, all the way to UIC Hospital, sat there in waiting rooms, hours on end, watching her child deteriorate, driving me back home for almost 2 years. And she stood tall. She never broke. Our father, our very strong, strapping, big, strong father, he crumbled, but not my father. My mother was not here for the medical community's bullshit. My father, Bundy, was a bomb thrower. He was volatile. He was mercurial. He left multiple countries. He got into multiple fights. He quit multiple jobs. He started multiple businesses. He spoke many languages. He was a pusher, a prodder. He was a fighter. We had an interesting house. There was a lot of shouting, right? A lot of hurt feelings. A lot of unkind words were said in multiple languages. A lot of voices raised. But then when the voices would die down and the chaos would subside, my mother would somehow make it into the kitchen. And smells would start to come out of the back of the kitchen, whether it was chicken paprikash or maybe goulash or maybe cholent. And in later years, maybe, a chicken stir fry maybe, when she started to expand her culinary palate. And she would gather us at that kitchen table. And she would sit us down. And she would serve us that meal quietly as a family. Gigi was not here for Bundy's bullshit. As Caroline already mentioned, my mom didn't have an instruction manual. And what I realized over these last few days, thinking back on it, was that she didn't have one, but she created one for us. An instruction manual with grit, resilience, perseverance, inner strength, love, laughter, style, strength, but above all, family. Always family. So she gave us this manual, the one that she never had. And it's our job now to pick it up and to use it. Use it in our own lives. Use it for the people that we love. And carry it further into this world. So in closing, I just want to say, thank you, Mom. Thank you for everything. Thank you for showing us the way. We love you. We will miss you. And we will never forget the instructions that you gave to all of us. Thank you.
Horrible.
What beautiful tributes. Without having a manual for life, while being a child survivor of the Holocaust, moving from house to house, she managed to not only raise two wonderful, wonderful boys, have a wonderful family, but the manner in which she cared for others. Undoubtedly, she was able to go deep into her own self, reconstruct herself from deep within, from her own neshama, from her own soul, while not being formally taught about her own Judaism, never going to a Hebrew school or anything like that. She nevertheless made Aliyah. She was determined to connect with that. I would just focus on one teaching which is found in the Talmud, which encapsulates, I believe, Zhuzhi's values and how she conducted herself in life. A teaching from Ethics of Our Fathers, a teaching from Hillel, from Pirkei Avot. Im ein ani li, mi li. Ukishani la'atzmi, mo ani. V'im lo achshav, ematai. Hillel would say, if I am not for myself, who will be for me? If I am only for myself, what am I? And if not now, when? This is a very, very simple teaching, but very deep. Notice that Hillel's teaching is always asking questions. He didn't just say it straightforward. Make yourself something. Care for others. And time is of the essence. It's about asking yourself, the right questions. And the right questions are, if I am not for myself, meaning someone who survives such a childhood has every right to go through life feeling like a victim. Hillel said no. Zhuzhi said no. I will stand on my own 2 feet. If I do not stand up for myself, who can I rely on? I can't pass the buck to anyone else. I'm going to do it. I'm going to stand up. I'm going to make of myself something. I'm going to do something. But that mindset, paradoxically, that mindset can be just focused on self. You can lead a life focused on oneself and no one else. That wasn't Zhuzhi. She asked herself the second question. And now if I'm only for myself, what am I? Now that I am something, now what am I? I have to focus now on what other people need. And finally, if not now, when? Time is of the essence. We all heard all the amazing, inspiring stories about Zhuzhi. Her power, her grit, her care of others, her care of others as a nurse, as was shared with me by Vic, who's here, whose father worked alongside Zhuzhi for many, many years, that she was a drill sergeant of nurses, taking care of the patients, taking care of all the other nurses that were there. But in her core, she was heart. She was all soul. She cared for everyone. At the same time, while being strong, she did it with power, she did it with care. She was the ultimate sabra. Prickly on the outside, but so sweet on the inside. Or, you can probably say, sandpaper covered with glitter. But that paradox in her life, I think, can be best expressed in the following comment that was shared to me, and I couldn't help but put the two together. Dan shared with me that, Mom, she had all the answers. She knew what was the right thing to do, and in any situation you would ask Mom, you would ask Juji. There was no need for a therapist because she had all the answers. To which Mike responded, "What do you mean? I needed therapy because of her." It was that paradox. That's where Juji stood, within the paradox. But that paradox was demanding of herself. She worked not because she needed more money. She worked because that was what she was needed for. You can go through life and think about what do I need, or you can go through life of thinking about what am I needed for. And that was Juji. Till she was 78, she continued to work. She continued to fulfill her task as being a nurse. She was able to give back what the Nazis took away, to fulfill her role, creating a family. She lost her family, she gave back family. But then finally, when? If not now, when? I had the privilege of knowing Juji for many years, and it came through her grandchildren. Ben and Becca were in our Hebrew school. That's where the family got involved, and we got to know Juji. Knowing that she is a Holocaust survivor, we wanted to share stories with our Hebrew school students, knowing that what happened then, to speak to the children. Juji would never speak about anything like that. But then she answered her own question, if not now, when? But she did it on only one condition. Only because of Ben. Only because of Ben am I going to share my story. And that's when she first spoke about her experience publicly. If not now, when? Was also about the here and now, was also about being present. Which grandchildren turn to their grandparents and ask for fashion advice? Becca shared, that's who I would turn to. She was present, she was in the here and now. She wasn't living in the past. She was determined. She got what she wanted. She was surrounded by love, surrounded by her family, Dan, Caroline, Michael, Emily, Ellie, and Hannah, Anne, Anna and Jesse, Ben, Becca, Izzy, Sophia. She was blessed with a great-grandchild, Ziggy. God willing, she has 2 more coming along the way, and her long-time caring partner, Barry. She got what she wanted. She never wanted to end up in a nursing home. She wanted to pass away at home, surrounded by her family and loved ones. And here we are now. We are now about to fulfill a mitzvah, which is called Chesed Shel Emes, a true Chesed of kindness. In life, we give and we take. We all give and we all take. There are 2 bodies of water in the land of Israel. One is the Dead Sea in the south, and one is the Kinneret up in the north. The Kinneret is filled with life, filled with all different types of fish. But the Dead Sea is the Dead Sea. And the sages of the Talmud ask why both bodies of water are fed by the Jordan. The same water feeds both bodies of water. Why is one filled with life and one dead? Because the Kinneret receives from the Jordan River, but it also gives. It receives and it gives forth. Whereas the Dead Sea only receives. And so in life we're all receive and we all give. Some give in order to receive, and some receive in order to give more. That was Zhuzhi. Here we're now going to do a chesed shel emes, a chesed, a kindness without any ulterior motives. And that is when a child goes to sleep, they want to be tucked in. As was mentioned, Zhuzhi wasn't tucked in. As she's being laid to rest now, it's our responsibility that we tuck her in. We don't pass that mitzvah onto strangers. We do it ourselves. And so I ask of all who would like to participate in this mitzvah to please join. The manner in which it's done, first I will take earth from the Mount of Olives, which is traditional, that as being that interment is only temporary, there will be a time where the world will be filled with love and kindness, meaning and purpose, the time of Mashiach, where there will be the revival of the dead, and Zhuzhi will be joining us, rejoining us. This revival of the dead begins, according to Jewish tradition, from the Mount of Olives, and therefore we include earth in the Mount of Olives in every funeral. We then take a shovel. We do it in an unusual way at first. We take it upside down to show that we're not eager to do this, and put a little bit of earth from there. And then we take the shovel and we put at least 3 shovelfuls into the earth, into the ground. But then we do not take the shovel and pass it on to others, because we do not pass grief from one to another. And also that each one of us should take out our own initiative in doing this mitzvah.